Hey, Stewart's Chapel, this is Don Pierson, and Don counts it behind the camera. Every now and then he'll stick his head in. I'll make him do that. He really doesn't want to do that. We're at his house, beautiful home. Appreciate their hospitality. This is Monday's devotion, and I'm staring at a hummingbird that is sitting on a flower right behind his head. Anyway, Monday's devotion, and we're still looking at our callings as Christians. And this is a general or a universal calling that God has upon His children. We're in John chapter 15. We've been in John chapter 15 before. I just really want to read one verse, verse 17. These things I command you, that you love one another. The New Testament shines a spotlight on one of the primary characteristics of God, and that is love. Jesus exemplifies it. He personifies it in all that He does. Over and over again, if you've been at Stewart's Chapel, you've heard at least 2 series of sermons over the 8 years that I've been there about what loving one another looks like. I've shared with you that there are anywhere from 21 to 20 tons more of one another commandments found in the New Testament. Each of those define this, what the love of one another looks like. When I was doing this, I did not realize that yesterday's or Saturday's devotion and this one would be back to back when I was putting them together. On Saturday, I shared with you about how it's a contradiction to say you're following Christ and refusing to be reconciled to another Christian. It's a contradiction. You can't be following Christ, have the calling of being a minister of reconciliation if you refuse to be reconciled. Well, it's the same thing true for this. One of the way God defines loving one another is forgiving one another. It is a contradiction to say you're following Christ and that you love one another if you're not able to forgive one another. This call to love, this calling to love is big in the Gospels. It has threefold. It's first, we are called to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, with all our mind. We're called to love our neighbor. Our neighbor can be another Christian, but it can also be someone that we've never met before and that's not a Christian. It can be a lost person. We're told to love our neighbor. Jesus gave us this parable of the Good Samaritan to kind of seal it with the wax around the edges so that we know that He expects us to love our neighbor. But over and over and over again, God tells us to love one another. The one another takes the love for all and brings it down to the family of God. The one another are those that you are in a one another relationship. You don't get to define that relationship. You don't get to define who you're in one another relationship. It's bigger than your church. That's why when a brother has a conflict with another brother and they think that they can find peace with God by leaving that church and going to another place, that's why it's impossible. Because see, the one another is bigger than your church. It's bigger than the Christians you want to define. The one another is for all one another's. All brothers and sisters in Christ. It's for the family. That is your calling. I wonder, how are you doing in fulfilling your calling to love one another? Love you, Stewart's Chapel.